South China Morning Post, 30th of January 2023. Chinese-sponsored Myanmar's anniversary of the coup, as Min Aung Hlaing, the military leader, schedules elections, junta hatred is growing. This week marks 2 years since a coup in Myanmar that sparked a civil war, destroyed the economy, and drove the nation back into exile. As a result, experts have warned that planned elections under junta rule won't offer a way out of the turmoil and carnage. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing took over on February 1, 2021, claiming extensive fraud in the general election, which had been won by Aung San Suu Kyi's party by a landslide a few months previously. The accusations, which analysts claim were unfounded but were supported by China, were used to justify the coup, which has plunged Myanmar into civil war as the military struggles to quell a sizable, becoming more organized uprising of ordinary civilians and armed ethnic rebel groups. Many civilians have seen repeated artillery and airstrikes, thousands of pro-democracy activists have been killed or imprisoned, and the army has suffered significant losses due to the broad insurgency. Despite the bloodshed, the junta announced last week that an election would still be held in late 2023 and that political parties would be allowed to participate. However, critics claim it would fall short of democratic norms with Suu Kyi, 77, behind bars. She faces 33 years on a series of politically motivated accusations, and a ban on candidates or parties with ties to terrorist groups as designated by the junta. The chances of peace and stability this year are very dismal, according to Hunter Marston, a researcher on Southeast Asia at the Australian National University, who added that if an election takes place, it won't be free, fair, or inclusive over the entire nation. Renaud Igrito, an associate professor at the City University of Hong Kong, claims that the junta seeks legitimacy and views parliamentary politics as a respectable manner of arranging political life, even if under military control. Igrito noted that hate of the junta was genuinely pervasive throughout most constituencies in the nation, adding that there are so many impediments along the path. While Igrito noted that there is no assurance of safety in a nation burned by violence, citizens will likely boycott any elections supervised by the military. According to Igrito, widespread vote manipulation by the dictatorship was likely. Armed rebel groups may well disrupt the process or prohibit election officials from operating in regions under their control, he added. Igrito continued that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and even China were unlikely to approve an election that had been sabotaged from the outset or a substantially distorted vote. Chinese hegemony causes economic suffering. While Min Aung Hlaing tries to impose the junta's rule throughout the nation, the economy of Myanmar is in freefall. The state of the nation is utterly unstable. In such an unstable environment, how can anyone conduct business? According to Hui Thane, an associate professor at Curtin University in Australia, the economy is ruined, with the kyat losing 40% of its value. Due to the coup and pandemic, Myanmar's economy shrank by about 20% in 2021. In contrast to the average 6 to 7% growth of the years before the coup, the World Bank predicted a modest 2% growth in 2022 and a 2.6% growth this year. According to the UN, the incremental economic improvements made in the decade before the coup have been erased, and approximately 700,000 people, many of them young, have abandoned the nation. The UN estimates that another 1.2 million people are internally displaced, including 250,000 children, and humanitarian supplies have run out. Poppy and opium production has drastically increased among poor farmers in conflict zones who have lost work as the country implodes, which is a sign of a reversed economy. According to a study last week from the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the production of opium, the main component of heroin, reached a 9-year high in 2022, amounting to almost 795 metric tons. That is nearly 2 times as much as the previous year's production. Farmers in border states and rural, frequently violent areas in northern Shan have little choice but to return to growing opium, according to UNODC Regional Representative Jeremy Douglas. Diplomatic bet increased. Despite a rare step by ASEAN to require a fellow member to create a clear road to peace, Myanmar has refused to stop its deadly campaign. ASEAN's chair this year, Indonesia, is under pressure to end the impasse. Several rights organizations have suggested removing Myanmar from the regional organization. But according to experts, ASEAN must first mend internal rifts between Mekong junta allies like Thailand and Vietnam and opponents like Indonesia and the Philippines who oppose the turmoil it has spread throughout the region. Earlier this month, Indonesia said it would establish a special envoy's office to address the post-coup turmoil in Myanmar. According to Hui Thane from Curtin University, the junta's relationship with ASEAN is anticipated to become tougher and more decisive this year under Indonesia's leadership due to the junta's eroding legitimacy. Key junta members and their families have been sanctioned by Western countries, particularly by the US. However, it seems that the military leadership is still determined to crush the opposition rather than talk with it. Elaine Pearson, Asia Director for Human Rights Watch, stated earlier this month that ending the Myanmar junta's extensive abuses required a global commitment to put pressure through targeted sanctions and justice for atrocities. Since the beginning of the coup, at least 2,600 individuals have died, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. Others believe that the actual number is significantly higher. According to a report released last week by the advocacy group Fortify Rights, there are reasonable grounds to assume that the junta committed crimes against humanity, stating that this meets the standard required by the International Criminal Court, ICC, to issue an arrest warrant. In a criminal complaint filed in Germany, Fortify Rights and 16 individuals from Myanmar demanded that Myanmar's generals be held accountable for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, including the 2017 purge of the Rohingya Muslim minority. Moscow-based friends and government sponsorship from China. According to experts, Myanmar will look to China for diplomatic protection as its international isolation worsens and turn to Russia and China for armaments. Since the coup, Min Aung Hlaing has made 3 trips to Russia. China, a significant economic partner with which Myanmar shares a long border, successfully fought off UN sanctions against Myanmar and has kept up its investments in the nation even after the military takeover. However, Marston claimed that China had been hesitant to support the junta fully, citing negotiations Beijing made with the ethnic armed groups to hedge against the military government's eventual collapse. Will the Chinese government eventually become weary of supporting an unstable Myanmar? Thane Hui added. We are unable to rule this out. Hui Thane called for the withdrawal of foreign money and weapons from Myanmar, citing the widespread international defense of Ukraine during Russia's invasion as an example of what the international community can do if it so chooses. The people of Myanmar are getting shortchanged when you compare what the world has done for them to what they have done for Ukraine, she remarked. We seek to belong to the Chinese hegemony.